So in terms of talking about improvisation, I thought I would talk a little bit about the things I do in my jazz improvisation class to get students thinking about improvising melodically. You've probably heard all sorts of people say that the best way to get started in improvisation is to take a melody that you know and jazz it up, right? Just change it a little bit. Well, what I've found is that a lot of students don't have any idea what that means. They don't understand what some of the techniques are. So what I'm going to hopefully show you now is some of the techniques that you could use, that you can isolate and practice as techniques and apply them in a real structured kind of way, and then eventually work to the point where they could use them more musically. So it's not just an exercise. Does that make sense? Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, good. Everyone knows that melody, right? One more time. Here's the distilled version. So basically, I just took a few notes out and brought it down to just half notes and whole notes. And I think you'll understand why I do that once we start working on the embellishments. Everyone think they can sing this? Okay. I have a little play along here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that, I like the solfege. I planned for various transposing instruments, but since all of you are singing, you'll be reading the top line unless you prefer the bass clef, and that way you'll go with the bottom line. Okay, so we've distilled the melody now down into just half notes and whole notes. You can hear how it's basically the same melody, right? But just what I consider the sort of bare essence of the melody. Okay. Now we're going to add passing tones. So basically, we're going to take the original melody, the original distilled melody, excuse me, and you see that I circled all of the melody notes from the original melody, and we're just going to add passing tones. So where the melody moves in thirds, I'm using diatonic passing tones. Where the melody moves in seconds, I'm using chromatic passing tones to basically use the same rhythm each time. So basically what we're going to do is practice using passing tones, a perfectly good melodic embellishment technique. Ready to sing? 1, 2, 3, 4. Do, do, re, mi, mi, fa, sol. Do, do, re, mi, mi, fa, sol. Do, do, re, mi, mi, fa, sol, sol, fa, mi, re, ra, do, re, mi, re, ra, ra. Re, ra, 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 pretty straightforward so far, right? Adding passing tones. Okay, now we're going to add neighbor tones. Same exact rhythm, but this time we're going to go with diatonic lower neighbors. So it's always going to be one note down in the key. Make sense? 3, 4. I have to pause for a second. Everyone's singing it chromatically.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that in about 2 slides, but it's actually, so far, so, what actually is what it would be. We'll continue. I neighbors, predictably. Ready? 2, 3, 4. By the way, I completely understand wanting to do it chromatically because the chromatic way just sounds better. It sounds more like jazz. It sounds more like blues because you're getting sort of a bluesy effect. Chromatic lower neighbors now. 1, 2, 3, 4. In my earlier presentation, yesterday I called these simple melodic embellishments. So at this point in the presentation, you may ask yourself, was it always going to be so simple? And the answer to that is no. We're about to ramp up the pace a little. It's going to get a little more challenging. When I say ramp up the pace, I don't mean the tempo is going to get faster. What I mean is that the density of embellishments is going to increase. So there's going to be more embellishments per note. So for example, double neighbors. So for each note in the original melody, we're going to do upper neighbor, upper diatonic neighbor, then the lower chromatic neighbor, then back to the note. Should we do that slowly first before we do it in tempo? So, should we sing that? 3, 4. And then. Hey, you don't need to practice that. That sounds perfectly good. Here we go. Right? A little more tricky. Moving on. Next step is even more chromatic, and I think even more fun, and I hope even more enjoyable, even though it's going to be a lot trickier. So before we even get to the play-along segment, I'm going to sort of have a moment here to practice it. This technique, I believe the term was coined by Bill Dobbins. He called it chromatic embellishment. It was a technique that we learned about when we were studying some of the transcriptions of the great jazz improvisers. Here's what it is. For every one of those the good notes, the distilled notes, usually the very consonant notes, the ones that are the sort of clear notes in the chord, a lot of the great jazz players will approach those notes by chromatic pitches coming from either direction. They'll surround the note. So in the case of C, they'll come perhaps from the diatonic pitch above, whole step above, and then a half step above the target note, half step below the target note, and then hit the target note. If the note above was only a half step, you may hear them come a half step above, in this case D flat, and then a whole step below, B flat to B natural, and then up to C. So, question. What percentage of great jazz improvisers do you think use this technique? You have a guess? All of them, yes. I just pulled a couple of examples out of transcriptions that I've either done or been provided with. The top one's a Louis Armstrong transcription. For each one, I play the segment at full speed, and then it plays twice again at a slowed down speed, so you can hear it a little more clearly. So you can see how the circled note is the target note in each case. So the G is a target in Louis Armstrong's case, and he precedes that with A flat from above and then F sharp from below. Charlie Parker does the same thing, in his case approaching that F in the second line, the G flat coming from above, and then E flat, E natural up to F from the bottom. Does that make sense? Any questions about how that works? There it is. There's just the F. Everyone hear that? Here's the second one. Man, that's fast. That's a sound you've heard the great jazz players all do before. They all do it all the time. So, how can we practice that technique? For each target note, think about the upper diatonic note. What is the note above that note diatonically? And if it's either a half step or a whole step, we give ourselves two cases that we can practice. The first case here, where the upper diatonic above C is a whole step, we'll call that case 1. Case 1 is the whole step, where the upper diatonic above the C is a D. Case 2, in the case of A, the upper diatonic is B flat, just a half step higher. Make sense so far? So case 1 and case 2. In the case of case 1, we'll make the pattern this. From the distance to the target note, we'll start with the whole step above the target, and then go a half step above the target, half step below the target, and then the target note. And that'll be our pattern every time the upper diatonic is a whole step above. That'll be the pattern no matter what. If the upper diatonic is a half step, we'll practice it going half step above, this is the lower line now, then a whole step below, half step below, and then we'll hit the target note. Does that make sense? So this is case 1, case 2. Where are we? Okay, we're going to do it on every note in the scale. Okay, let's practice. Okay, so here's Re down to Do is going to be case 1, because Re is a whole step higher than Do. Okay, ready? Shall we sing? 3 and 4 and 1. One more time. 3, 4, 1. Good. Mi down to Re, same situation. Case 1, because Mi is a whole step above Re, right? 3, 4, 1. Good. Fa down to Mi, case 2. That's only a half step. 3, 4, 1. Good. So down to Fa is case 1. 3, 4, a half step. Okay, and then re down to do, again, case 1. Okay, ready to do it all in one long sequence?
Sure.
So you can see I've circled all the notes from the major scale, and then we're just going to play the note from the major scale and then immediately go on and precede the next good note, the next scale tone, with a chromatic embellishment around it. Okay? Ready? 2 and 3 and 4. Good. Doesn't it start to almost sound like Lee Konitz? Have you heard Lee Konitz? Warren Marsh? All the musicians who came out of the Lenny Tristano School of Improvisation do a lot of things like this. You know, basically take a few moments to sort of arrive at the note chromatically, and it forces you to think ahead too, right? For every note, you have to think, okay, where am I ending up? What's the good note that I'm trying to get to, and finding a creative, colorful, chromatic way of getting there. Does that make sense? Okay, can we come down the scale? 3, 4. Good. One more practice exercise, doing a minor scale. This is where it gets really colorful. All right, so we're going to do the ascending minor scale with chromatic embellishments into each note. 3 and 4 and. Technique to a major scale. Okay, now let's apply that technique to When the Saints Go Marching In. 3, 4. 2 and 3. You see where this is going, right? Okay, you ready to do it in time? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. All of a sudden it starts to sound like Lee Konitz. And all we did was take a very straightforward melody and apply this technique to it. Okay, we still aren't really making music yet. So the next step is to freely mix all these techniques now. So this is what I'm hoping is a way to move from just playing exercises to actually making music. So practically everything we've done so far in this part of the exercise was melodic. Now we're going to change some of the rhythms too. Either adding a few syncopations, just taking a few of the notes and either making them come in an eighth note later or an eighth note earlier, and just try to mix up the rhythm a little bit. Ready? We can just play this, right? We don't need to practice. Do your best to read along. I'll do the same. 2, 3, 4.
There was a note.
There was probably there was a mistake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a mistake. Right, I had a chromatic error in there.
But like, okay, so it wasn't supposed to be.
What was the mistake that you said?
Well, it's a G sharp that should have been a G natural, but I guess
I think that was a mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, you caught me. No, there was a mistake in there. Yeah, my student yesterday found it. I just didn't have time to fix it. You can be my proofreader for the next time, okay? Okay, so the next step, as I see it, is to write your own half note melody. So basically, you could just compose a series of half notes that are not necessarily related to the original melody, but maybe fit with the chord progression, and make it really simple, really straightforward, just like the melody, leave lots of space, and we'll consider these in sort of our cantus firmus, if you will. Excuse me for going the route of 16th century theory. Okay, shall we sing along? Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do some of those techniques on this melody now. So now we're not dealing with the original melody of the song, but one that I just made up. It's fairly melodic, right? Shall we do lower chromatic neighbors? 1, 2, 3, 4. Doesn't it? So for each one of these, you have to think ahead. Before the note is the next diatonic note above it a half step or a whole step. And if it's a whole step, the pattern is whole above, half below, note, dee da da da. Then in the case of A, is it a whole step or a half step? Half step. So it's B flat, G, G sharp, A. Ba da do do, be do do do, be da do da. Be-do-da-da, be-do-do-dee, dee-dee-do-da. Dee-do-do-do. I did it wrong. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Good, you should give yourselves a round of applause, that was good. Okay, let's try it with a different song. Okay, so same exact techniques. This time we'll do it with What Is This Thing Called Love? We're not going to go through all of the techniques, but just to show you that you can do this with other songs other than simple ones. What Is This Thing Called Love? Not quite so simple. Ready to sing again? Okay, you got the words here. This is an AABA song form. This one is particularly colorful because it's Cole Porter. It's already fairly chromatic. How many of you know this song? A little bit? What I love about this song is that you're never quite sure if it's in minor or major. Cole Porter is great at throwing minor, major curveballs. So you hear the first couple of measures. That's a 4 chord, and you assume it's going to go to minor, but it doesn't. It goes to major. It's just one of the most beautiful, colorful melodies I can imagine. Sorry, is everyone ready to sing? Okay, 1, 2, 3. This funny thing great song, isn't it? Okay, so we're going to do the same kinds of exercises on this. Okay, we'll start with the melody. I'm going to try to play along, but try to spell me a little bit. So first we'll do the melody, and we'll just sing it not with the words, but just solfege if you prefer, whatever you like. If you want to just sing it on neutral syllable, that would be okay. Then I've written a new melodic line of just half notes and whole notes on the chord progression to what is this thing called love, and then we'll apply the same techniques to that half note and whole note line as we did to a simpler song. Make sense? Here we go. A 1, 2, 3. A little faster. Okay, any questions about that? Everyone follow along with sort of what the techniques were? I don't realistically expect 5th graders to be able to do that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Realistically, in a high school jazz band setting, how long from you introducing them to breaking it to a distilled melody to doing something like that?
To doing something like this?
Yeah.
All year.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is a lifelong pursuit. I don't reasonably expect. I don't see why you can't introduce the pattern with some high school kids.
Right.
With simpler things. But with a song as rich as what is this thing called love, I wouldn't expect.
Like going back to like when the Saints go marching in and doing all the different kinds of permutations that you did with it, like going from just one neighbor to the more complicated one.
Yeah, you know what you might want to do is rather than do it to every note, which really does increase the pace dramatically, is that you might want to do it with every other note. So you might want to go bo-dee-doo-doo-dum, right, and then skip the next one, and then.
So maybe like the start of every measure or phrase.
Yeah, ba-ba-doo-da-la. So every measure is bo-be-doo-doo-dum, ba-ba-doo-doo-dum. So they have a little bit of time to think, maybe, and try to apply the pattern.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Do you do all of this with notation, or do you do it by ear?
Yes.
Which do you do first?
Whatever seems to make sense. I'm not trying to be snarky. I hope anytime someone asks me a really good question like that, and the answer is they're both good exercises. It's if you have a kid who doesn't necessarily read too well, but they seem to be guitarists, for example. Maybe they don't read very well. Maybe they haven't had as much experience in reading. See if they can do it by ear. I think maybe with singers it would be easier to do by ear if you haven't had years of solfege. But with a clarinet player, a trumpet player, a saxophone player who started by reading, maybe it makes more sense to start them with reading and seeing if that can help get them into these exercises, and then do it more by ear later. Does that make sense?
So ultimately, they can do both. They can do it both ways. That's the goal. Because even as we did this now, I can read it. I mean, with the help of however many other people are in the room singing along. But then you did the one by ear, and I was like, oh, that I have to think. You know what I mean? and I would I'll remember that as opposed to just. So that'll stick with me, because isn't the goal to be able to? Here's a chart.
Absolutely.
Take a solo, so that would ultimately a student be able to do this process on their own?
Can I address what I'm doing?
Sure.
I've actually been playing head charts with jazz. My more advanced kids, I've pulled them out because I went from having one kid 5 years ago to having over 30 in jazz, and so I've got kids from all over the spectrum in this jazz ensemble. And I take my most advanced kids and pull them out. We're doing this sort of thing, but I've got kids that really are very visual kids. They want to see notes on a page. So my thing is not to take the creativity away from them so that they stop improvising. And I don't want them. I want them to improvise, but I want it to be all of their own ideas. So what I'll do is give them we'll literally make up what I call a toolbox, and it'll have a rhythm bank in it. It'll have notes in the chords. I mean, depending on whether they want to follow the chords, whatever method they're most comfortable with. But these kids actually are writing out their own improv solos. And when they get comfortable with that, it's really cool because they won't come off the page. And these are kids that are just like latched onto this music stand. Man, if I took music stand away from those kids, they would just be freaked out. But it's funny, even their improv solos, they'll take the head chart up and they want to have a stand up by the microphone.
Yeah.
So it's these are the kids that, and I'm with them on that. That's the way I'm most comfortable too.
We all are. Well, I told you, did I mention that's what I'm doing at my concert tonight? The Ithaca College Jazz Ensemble is playing at 7:15. Do you remember what room we were playing in?
It's in the ballroom at the plaza.
At the Rochester Plaza.
Yeah.
The ballroom at the Rochester Plaza. And we didn't bring any music stands. We're going to play an hour concert.
No music stands.
All memorized, all head charts.
Awesome.
Yeah. And what I'm going to demonstrate too, I'm going to teach the band a head chart that they've never played before in the concert, so I can sort of see the process. Did we get away from your question a little bit? I can't remember if we. Did that answer your question?
So being able to do it by ear is as important as being able to read it.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
You have to, so
Yeah.
you want to.
But I like the idea too of seeing if they can come up with either in writing or just on their instruments come up with a half note melody to their solos. If there's a song, they have an 8-bar solo. Let's say and they have the chords. Ask them to write a solo of half notes. One of the great exercises that Lee Konitz is one of my favorite saxophonists, And when I got a chance to meet him, and he talked about how what he would do is he would practice improvising. He would play a song that he was working on, and he would just play the melody, he said, for 20 minutes. And then he would improvise a solo of nothing but whole notes. Nothing but whole notes. And see if he could improvise a good solo of whole notes that was interesting and melodic, but had no connection to rhythm whatsoever. Just see if he could sort of follow the chords and make a good melody. And then he would do that with half notes, and then he would do it with quarter notes. Each step along the way, he would do it for 20 minutes. So maybe some kids could do a solo of whole notes, but maybe some would want to write it out first. See if they could write out an 8-bar solo. And then, once they've gotten a good 8-bar solo of either whole notes or half notes, then, well, now I want you to apply some of these techniques to it. You know, see if you can apply some double, a neighbors, upper neighbor, lower neighbor, double neighbors, and see if they can connect the notes, and then sort of build an interesting solo that way. I think one of the things that people forget is that you can't reasonably expect someone to improvise well if they can't compose well, because you're composing spontaneously. If you're trying to compose spontaneously and you can't compose when you have a chance to think about it and slow it down, you don't reasonably have a chance of improvising well. You can't reasonably expect that of yourself or anybody. Does that make sense? Do you have a question? Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was wondering where this approach fits in your teaching with other approaches, and even methods designed to help build scales and finger agility and stuff like that. Where does this fit in with a larger context?
I think the diatonic neighbors is a great exercise for scales.
Yeah.
Because you have to think, well, what's the next note up in the scale? What's the next note down in the scale? I think that's a great exercise. The other thing that I do for scales, if I'm working with younger kids, is I have them play a simple song like When the Saints Go Marching In, and I'll have them play that in other keys. And see if you can hear your way through, if you're working on the F scale, now let's work on the B flat scale. Can you play that same song in B flat? That's sort of a different exercise than what we're talking about, but equally valid, I think, to your point. Did I answer?
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering is like what percentage of the time you're using this and what percentage you're using other approaches to get them comfortable with the notion of reading a chart and kind of going off on their own, making their own melody.
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that my experience is going to be particularly helpful
Right,
to you
you're in
because I've got
college.
college
Yeah.
kids. So, and I've got kids who I see in another. This is something I would do in an improvisation class. But if I'm in an ensemble rehearsal, I wouldn't be able to spend a long time on things like this, and understandably so if you're working on ensemble music. So. I think the more ear training you can do, the better off you are, basically. So the faster you can get away from the printed page and to doing it by ear, the better off they will be, because then they can do it themselves. Again, I'm worried I didn't answer your question.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Right. Any other questions? Everybody knows everything? No? Okay. Okay, I thought there was one other thing that could have come up in your heads, and if it didn't, I will go ahead and raise the question. When you're working on these embellishments, how do you decide which is the right note to be diatonically higher? If you're doing a simple song, like When the Saints Go Marching In, it's clear, right? The diatonic neighbor above is clear. However, there's going to be a time when it comes up when you're not always sure, because sometimes the chord of the moment versus the key of the piece disagree with each other in terms of which one is diatonic. So if the diatonic upper neighbor in one may be different than the other. I'll give you an example. In What Is This Thing Called Love, in the bridge, where we go to C minor, F7 to B flat, okay, we're in the key of C. The next chord is A flat 7. And the melody note was C. Which is the diatonic neighbor? Is it D flat? Or is it D natural? Because if you're thinking of the chord, it's D flat. If you're thinking of the key, then you want to hear D natural. Right? D natural would be the way. So Well, you've now asked the fundamental question. You didn't ask. I posed the question. We've now posed the fundamental question of jazz improvisation, as I see it. Okay? There's a continuum here. Which is more important to be thinking about? The key of the piece or the chord of the moment? That's a good question you asked. If I just focused on the chord of the moment, and you'll see, if you work with your students, and let's say you've got a good student, and you say, here are the notes of the chord. We're going to play a blues. Here are the notes of the chord. 1, 3, 5, 7. And they go, and their first improvisation, they go. They're focusing on every chord of the moment. But does it sound good yet? It sounds overly academic and non-melodic. Okay, what happens if they just focus on the key of the piece? For example, I don't know, the quote-unquote blues scale. They're not focusing on any of the chords as they go by. They're just focusing on the key of the piece. That's what the blues scale is, right? The blues scale is the key of the piece. It's not the chord of the moment. Then they sound like they don't know what they're doing. They don't sound like they have any knowledge of harmony. So the right answer is that all of the great jazz musicians find that middle ground, right in the middle. They find the art. The art of jazz improvisation is found in the middle. You can't spend too much time on one side or the other. There's lots of great jazz players who lean towards one side or the other. You know, if you think that Charlie Parker focuses too much on the chord of the moment, he'll play all these beautiful chromatic, you know, he'll follow up something really chromatic with a really bluesy line about half a second later, just to remind you that, oh, by the way, in case you thought I was paying too much attention to the chord of the moment, I'm going to play something really bluesy in the key of the piece, just to remind you that, by the way, this music is based in blues. Does that make sense? So there is no right answer. The right answer is good luck in finding the art there, because we're all striving for it and we're all looking for it. So if you say that D flat is the right note, then you're thinking more about the chord of the moment. That is not wrong. That's just the decision that you made. Okay? If you play D natural, then you were thinking of the key of the piece. That's not wrong either. That was just the decision that you made at that point. And as long as you go through that thinking process and say, well, if I focus too much on the key of the piece, maybe people are going to think I'm not quite following the chords well enough. So maybe I should go focus on the chord for a moment.
Should be like the group of chords of the moment, right? I mean, if you're in the middle of a 2-5-1 change, then it makes more sense to lean that direction.
You make a really good point, because yeah, what if the chords, you know, the bridge of the song goes further away from tonic? Then you're thinking, well, I want to really emphasize the fact that we're further away from tonic now, so I may focus more on the chords of the moment to bring that out. Makes coming back to the key of the piece more colorful. Good decision point. That was your thinking process, right? As you're improvising.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? I didn't prompt any more questions with that huge blanket statement about the nature of jazz improvisation that we all struggle with for 50 years. Okay. Really? Nothing else? Okay. If you want it, you can have it. Yeah, that's it. Just yeah.
Okay, what if you have a dumb phone and not a smartphone?
I'll give you my card. You can email me. I'll send you the link. This is all the movie files and all the audio files and the PowerPoint. Just give me credit when you use this stuff, okay?
Oh yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Come to the IC Jazz Ensemble tonight, 7:15, and the